So thank you everyone for joining the first of our four-part webinar series. And this evening, we're going to have Ellen talking, sharing her experiences, sharing her tips and tricks for sort of race day strategy and preparation and everything to do around event day. So Ellen has a pretty phenomenal career racing in Commonwealth Games and World Championships and the Pan American Games, and now turned to coaching, so to share her wealth of knowledge with a lot of youth and adult athletes. So we're very excited to have her with us tonight. So I will pass it over to you, Ellen, and I'll just keep tabs on participants, letting them in and managing the chat box for this evening.
Amazing. Thanks, Tim. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here tonight. Thanks for taking the time to tune in and listen stories, and I hope you can go away with some new tips that you can apply to your next race. So first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm in Vancouver right now, and Vancouver is located on the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. So let's get started with a little bit about me. So my name is Ellen Pennock. I raced for Canada for about 10 years. In 2013, I was the silver medalist at the U23 World Championships. I've raced at the Commonwealth Games and then Pan American Games. I've also guided for Paratri. And last year, I was the assistant coach for the 2022 Canada Games for Team BC. And so you can see the team here. We had a silver medalist in Daniel, and Colette won gold, and then our relay team won gold. So Team BC represented very well, and it was great to work with Kelly. So I don't know if any of you here would know Kelly Guest, but he's one of my mentors and a great coach I've been working with. So a few pictures from my career. This is on the left here of coming down the finishing straight at Pan American Games 2015. And here's a picture from racing London WTS, I think in 2014. Some para guiding here. So guiding for Jess Tuamala, who you may know of. She is racing, going for Paris, and she would have raced in Tokyo at the 2021 games, where I think she finished 5th. So make sure to keep an eye on Jess, and Jess trains out of Victoria. Here are some more recent photos. So this is again from Canada Games last year with our gold medal winning relay team. And it was just such a fun, amazing experience where I learned a lot as a coach and got to share some of my wisdom as an athlete. And then here on the right is last year coaching with Kelly, the youth group that we have out of Victoria that is called Kelly's Kids. So if anyone here has any kids interested in getting into triathlon, I will pass along a link at the end. So before we get started too, I just wanted to get a sense of where people are from in BC. So if you don't mind dropping into the chat where you're zooming in from tonight. And let's get a sense of where in BC. So I know we have some people from Burnaby.
Paul from Burnaby, yeah.
Yeah, from Burnaby. Yeah, where else? Feel free to unmute or to type in the chat as well.
I'm Keith from Victoria.
Yeah, I know you, Keith. I definitely have seen you at lots of events officiating. Is that right?
Yeah, helping out.
Yeah. Yeah, nice to see you, Keith.
Thanks.
Where else are we zooming in from? East Van, North Van. Awesome. So Vancouver represented. We have let's see, maybe okay, yeah. So great to have so many people on this call. And then another question I had for folks was how many people here are racing drafting versus non-drafting? So draft legal versus not draft legal. Because the strategies definitely differ between those two disciplines. So yeah, feel free to unmute or to tap into the chat So not drafting, not drafting. We have a few
Not
non-drafting.
drafting.
Not drafting.
Okay, great to hear. So lots of non-drafters. Any drafters on this call? TBD. We have someone who's TBD. So I will I'll make some mention to draft legal because I think they're really fun and they're introducing more and more into the circuit. So for age group racing, and if there's anyone who's thinking about doing, I know there's a question about going from juniors into U23s. So I will do a few mentions of some draft legal just to get more perspective on triathlon in general. So some of the race strategies we're going to chat about today, we're going to talk about some strategies that you can implement in your training leading into a race, some day before strategies so you can feel really confident and in control. We're going to do some swim strategies, bike strategies, and run strategies for actual race day. So let's get started with, starting off with training leading into the race day. So this could be months, weeks, days, depending on when you're signing up. So regardless of when you sign up, here are a few, I'd say, key things you can implement. Again, if you have a race in mind months out, or if on a whim you decide to race, let's say in like a week. So this first one, I think that's really important, and one that I did a lot as in my career was making sure to study the race course, and then I spelled practice wrong. Practice those demands in training. So some homework for everyone here for your next race. I'd love you to go onto the course, onto the race website, find these courses, and really study them. So you're looking for, is it a hilly course? How many corners are on the course? And why this is important is because you really want to get to know the race course like the back of your hand so that there's no surprises on race days. And even especially in the local races where they are officiated or there's volunteers on course, you always just want to make sure you know where you're going as well. If there's any turns, I think it's really great for the athlete to take responsibility of knowing where you are on the course. So a few things you can do is, so this one right here is like, this picture right here is from the Elk Lake Tri. So you can see how it's a very kind of straightforward race. So there's like one turn, I guess there's a turn right there too, and a pretty sharp turn at that. But then when you go ahead and look at the course profile, you can see there's a pretty significant hill, and anyone who's ever raced the Elk Lake Tri will know that this is Old West Saanich. It's rolling, it's very hilly, and it's very hard until you hit that downhill to get onto West Saanich, where it's flat for a bit, and then you go back up. It's a turnaround right here, and then you go back up Old West Saanich. So it's important to know this because just like looking at this, you have no idea that it was a decently hilly course. And then what you can do knowing that is then you can implement that into your training. So let's say, for example, for this course, I guess the reason why is because you want to understand the demands. So what are the demands of the race course, and then how can you best prepare for those demands? So for this one, a demand would be having especially a non-draft, being able to have a good sustained power, so a pretty high FTP over a long period of time. I would also say having some good bike handling skills, because if you know this course, this is quite a technical, especially on the downhill. And so knowing that, you can create some workouts that help you simulate that type of course. So for example, you could do, let's say, a 2x5 minute climb with some easy in between. And then this flat part on the top, you could do more of a steady state. So again, a little bit above your threshold for 2x5, and then practicing again, maybe 5 minutes at that threshold. So you want to take the race course and then ask your coach, or if you're coaching yourself, then create some workouts that mimic that race course. This course is a draft legal course. So this was 2017 World Championships in Rotterdam. And this was actually where I guided for Jess, and the para course was more technical than the elite course. So as you can see, there's actually 2 transitions. So this is transition 1, transition 2 is over here. And if you look closely, I think if you count the number of corners per lap, there's over 20. So in total, I think we did 5 laps. So we're doing over 100 corners on a tandem bike. So as you can see, the demands of this course are much different than the demands of this course, and then require different training leading in to those races. So for this race, for example, the demands are more so being able to sprint in and out of corners. So something you can add into your training is more of that, those spiky workouts where you do perhaps like a 2-minute hard effort into 4 by 15 seconds sprint, 45 seconds off, in order to get your body prepared to meet the demands of this course. So yeah, a story from this was when I was training, I trained with Gwen Jorgensen, who is who won gold in Rio. And we would often, leading into this race in Auckland, New Zealand, it was called Auckland Spec. And whenever we heard Auckland Spec, people would shiver because it was so hard. Auckland was known for being very hilly. And so we would do this 7-kilometer loop with 2 pretty significant hills in them. And that was to prepare us for the demands of the Auckland course. And then another example I think of are, so the Norwegians right now are doing very well in triathlon. This is an extreme example of very, very fit people. But I know Christian and Gustav ran 40 kilometers of running the week before Hawaii, because there the demands are the heat and being able to run a fast marathon in the heat. And I definitely do not recommend doing that a week before your race. But in this case, they're very highly trained. And as you can see with Gustav winning the World Championships, it definitely paid off. So another thing to remember leading into the race is to make sure to test out all of your equipment and nutrition. So there's a saying many of you may have heard, is nothing new on race day. So what does this mean? This means making sure you're doing some training in your triathlon suit. You want to know, do you need body glide? Is it chafing anywhere? Are you going to wear socks? You need to practice running in socks and no socks, depending on what you prefer. Doing some race specific training in your race shoes, because your race shoes are going to be lighter. They're going to be a little bit different than your trainers. And your body needs to get used to doing a little bit of training in those race flats or those faster shoes before you go on race day. Another one is testing out your wetsuit. So don't wear a new wetsuit in a race. Make sure you're getting some practice in. And then also practicing your nutrition. So this is a picture of what someone eats in race day for Ironman. I personally have never done Ironman. I haven't coached anyone doing Ironman, so I can't confirm if this is a proper nutrition, but I know Kellyanne will probably cover that in the next few days. But yeah, you want to make sure like that breakfast that you're eating the morning of your race, you have practice that on like a key workout day to make sure it sits well on your stomach. And then anything you're consuming during the race too, you want to make sure that sits well on your stomach. So definitely test out all your equipment and nutrition in your training leading into the race. This one it's a bit pixelated, but it says a clean house is a sign of a triathlete on taper. So that's related to always making sure you're tapering into a race, even if you don't feel fully prepared. So what taper means is leading into a big event, your training drops off, the volume comes down so that you feel fresh and feel good going into your race. So I have another story of what makes me think of this. So actually for that Elk Lake Tri that I had the map of a few slides earlier, I last summer did a relay with, I did the bike And then I had 2 friends do the swim and the run. And my friend who was doing the run had said that she hadn't run 10K in 3 years. And we signed up for the race 4 days before. And she was like panicking a little bit and was like, I'm going to go out and run 10K to make sure I can do it. And I said, Millie, I'm sorry, but it's too late. Like, this is not a good idea. I know you don't feel prepared, but I know you can do it. You're going to go out there and you're going to feel the race energy, but you need to rest leading into this race. Otherwise, you're going to feel so sore and tired on race day. So now is not the time to do any panic training if you're not feeling prepared. And I think a sign of confidence in your abilities is being able to rest properly before a race and not feeling like you have to prove anything in those days before, and know that when you do start to rest, you're actually helping yourself for resting. You're getting stronger, and you're filling your body with the glycogen it needs and the recovery it needs to be able to really get the most out of yourself on race day. So for a taper, what it looks like is you want to feel rested, but you don't want to feel sluggish. So there's definitely a sweet spot of where there's enough, like just the perfect amount of rest without resting too much. Like there is such thing as resting too much. So what that looks like is different for every person. But for the kind of general time frame is you can go as little as 4 days of recovery for a sprint race and up to 3 weeks of a taper for an Ironman. And where you fall in your race will fall somewhere in between there. But again, everyone is different. And to really get your taper right, it takes some time to work with your coach in order to find what works best for you. So what a taper includes would be looking at reducing in the overall volume of your training. So you want to go down on volume. You want to keep some intensity to stay sharp. And you can also reduce the training frequency a little bit, but again, kind of keeping in touch with your daily rhythm, but lowering the volume, lowering the amount of time you're training each day. Another thing I like to do as an athlete, and I recommend for athletes I've helped coach, is 2 days before a race. So not the day before, but 2 days out, is to take a full day off. I find that really helps rejuvenate and really helps you feel nice and quick on race day. And then that gives you a day to do some nice light activation the day before a race. So that is all about tapering. So now that brings us to the day before the race. So we all know those, what it can feel like the day before the race. Having some pre-race jitters is totally a normal thing. So a few things that can help is writing out a schedule, packing your bag the night before, and then also writing out some process and outcome goals to kind of steer your attention to something productive. So writing out a schedule, this is a schedule I wrote out for Pan Am Games I found on my phone. So I woke up at 5:30, I ate at 5:40, left the village at 6:10, arrived at the village at 6:30, ran for 15 minutes at 6:35, checked in, did a ride warm up, put myself in transition, and then swam until 8:10. So I'm guessing the race probably started around 8:30. So how I did this was you want to start with your race time. So I didn't include that, but and then work backwards to figure out what time you need to wake up, and then making sure you can add in everything you need to do. Because I know the last thing you want to feel on race morning, especially when triathlons are always so early in the morning, is feeling rushed, forgetting something, not eating enough. So that is definitely something I get all of the athletes that I work with to do. This is kind of how you do it. So start off with your race start. This would be an example, 15 minutes to line up on the beach, get in a swim warm up, include putting on your wetsuit. Think about all the things you need to do to make sure that, and to budget extra time as well. Set up transition, run warm up, arrive at venue, drive at venue, I needed to always budget in time to braid my hair. That was unique to me. Eat breakfast, and then so that would 7 a.m. Race start in this case would mean a 4:15 wake up, which doesn't sound very pleasant, but in order to get in all this stuff and feel prepared and feel relaxed, that's kind of what I would need to do in order to perform at my best. And another thing too is making sure you understand how the race venue is lined up, so that you know how to navigate around to the different to transition, and let's say to get to the race start, so you can easily get from place to place without feeling stressed. And then another thing you can do, which is kind of a nice ritual to form, would be to write out your race goals, both like the outcome and process goals, both being important, but putting the emphasis on the process. So these are two notebooks. This one on the left is mine from a race. I can't remember which one. And then on the right here, this is something from Gwen Jorgensen, who again won the gold medal at the Rio Olympics. Gwen writing out some specific cues before the race. So for the process goals, I really like athletes to focus on those rather like I would say you can start with an outcome goal and have that as kind of your target, but then you want to put that away and you want to focus on your process goals. So your outcome goal would be, I want to come top 10 in my age group. And then you put that aside and then think about, okay, in this race, how am I going to get there? And it's going to be by these process goals, and you have control over the process goals. You don't necessarily have control of the outcome goals. So an example of a process goal would be breathing every 3 in the swim. That one's quantifiable. One for the bike would be holding 90 RPM for the whole ride. A run one would be holding 90 steps per minute in the run. And then you can also have like the examples here with Gwen are going to be more qualitative, and they're a little bit more like cues. So if you can read them, they're kind of hard to see. But on the bike, she says this one here: be aware and alert of wind and of people, potential breakaways. Get to front before transition and stay on front. Be in the top 6 of bike group at all times. On the run, it says stay relaxed on uphills, tack downhills, shoulders relaxed, let arms come through all the way. Keep cadence up, head down into wind. So those are some, I would say those are qualitative, and they're also cues. So one thing I also used to do was take a little piece of tape and tape it to my my stem, and then write a few keywords that I wanted to remember for the ride. So that might be like relax the elbows, or like believe you belong, just something that's really meaningful to you that you can look down during the race and remember to kind of like, when you're racing, you just need like really subtle things because you're so focused and you're working really hard. So having those few keywords can be really powerful. And I know there's a sports site coming on later this week, or later this month, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of other great tips. All right, so let's move on now to the race itself. So here are some swim strategies. So definitely want to do a good short swim warm up and note the conditions. Depending on how confident you are in your swim, there's a few different ways you can start, which can set you up positioning wise. And then also learning how to sight is a very important skill to have for open water swimming. So this is a course of Tokyo, the Olympics. So for here you can see this is I forget what this is called. This is the Rainbow Bridge. It's a bay. You can see it's probably very protected, probably very little currents. But the thing is, with Tokyo, both races started at 6 in the morning. So at that time of day, the sun's going to be low in the sky. You could get sun in your eyes. So it's really important to, during your swim warm up, to also take some time to look around your surroundings, pay attention to like, where is the current coming from? Is it going to make you drift and therefore go off course and swim extra? Is the sun going to blind you at a certain angle and you won't be able to see the buoy? What kind of goggles do you need? Do you need clear goggles or do you need tinted goggles because it's sunny or it's cloudy? So that's a really great time, is to get in for a swim warm up and make notes of those conditions, so that you also just feel really confident in like, the course, where you're going, and you just have some really great markers to be able to cite off of. So when it comes to the start, I know some people, they can be quite intimidating. Like, if I look, this start makes my heart rate go up, because I remember being on these kind of start lines where everyone's sprinting into the water. So depending on how you feel, how confident you are as a swimmer, if you are really confident in your swimming, maybe you have a swim background, the start is a really great place to make a move, and don't be afraid to do the first 100, 200 meters really hard. What it means will you get some clear water, which is always nice, and you won't have to necessarily fight people. If you're feeling less confident in your swim start, then you may want to think about giving yourself a little bit of extra time to get in, going on the outside in order to give yourself more space between other people, and really just ease into it rather than sprinting that first 200 meters. Find that rhythm, find your breath, find a breathing pattern that works well for you. But I really think you can set yourself up for a great race right at the beginning. And again, it comes down to how confident you feel in your swim, and either way, you can set yourself up for success. So this is a picture from a World Cup in Edmonton. I thought it was a cool photo because it really shows sighting. So sighting is a really, really important skill to learn open water for both safety and for staying on course. So what it is you lift your head just a little bit above the water when you go to breathe, so that you can see where you're going, and you can you can look on the horizon to see for landmarks. So if we go, I don't know if we'll be able to go back, but remember the Tokyo swim course. It's important to, in that warm up, like, make note of certain landmarks on the horizon, especially when you're coming into the finish, so you don't go off course. And so that you can sight, look for those, and be able to swim straight to shore, because the last thing you want to do is swim extra. And so this will keep you on course and set you up for a great start to your race. On to some bike strategies. So we're going to talk about some transitions. We're going to talk about pacing, and then also the importance of having some good, solid technical skills. So this one here is called the flying mount. This is sort of, this is like goals for triathlon. So this is like a very good transition. As you can see, the shoes are on the bike, and they're probably attached to the bike with some elastics. And she is running in bare feet, and will jump on her bike and then slip her shoes into her bike. So again, transitions, the shorter the race, the more important the transitions become, the more the transitions matter. So if you're doing longer races, I wouldn't necessarily suggest you learn a flying mount, even if you're doing an Olympic. But if you wanted to get a little bit more competitive, if you want to teach yourself a new skill, learning this kind of transition is really fun, and it also saves you lots of time. But again, you can make up a lot of time by having a really smooth transition, and what that comes down to is practicing. I also suggest practicing your transition for a longer race, like an Ironman. Especially when you kind of have that race brain, you want to make sure you know sort of the flow on socks, and then helmet and nutrition, and just making sure you have that practice so it's automated, so that come race day, you don't forget any of your nutrition when you head out onto the bike, or you don't forget to put on your socks or something like that. Another another tip I have for transition is making sure to lay out a nice colorful towel right at your rack, so that you can easily identify where your bike is, and as well noting in the transition area if there's a pole or a tree, so that when you're running out from the swim, you easily know how to navigate and find your bike. Because again, sometimes you see people like running around the maze of transition, and losing a whole bunch of time. So this is another way to shave a few seconds. Okay, so now we're going to talk about pacing on the bike. So again, it sounds like a lot of people are doing non-drafting. And so in that case, you really want to focus on keeping your power and your effort really consistent. So what that means is on the bike, and I guess in exercise in general, you really have a limited number of matches. And so what matches are kind of like energy that you burn off, or sort of like when the effort really spikes. So every time, let's say you go into a corner and you have to get up out of the saddle and sprint really hard to get back up to speed, or let's say you are over your FTP by a little bit too much for a certain amount of time, that's going to burn a match. And you only have a certain number of matches for the race. And so in order to conserve your matches, and you also want to conserve these matches because you also have to run afterwards, is making sure you're riding at a very consistent power and effort. So this right here is a picture of Ben Canute's power and his file from World Championships in 2017 in Chattanooga. And what I found interesting was, so his average power was 324 and his normalized power was 334. So what that means, normalized power is it's an averaging method. It's used to compensate for changes in ride conditions for a more accurate depiction of power expenditure. So basically it takes out all of the dead points, and it sort of like smooths out the power, and is a more accurate representation of how hard that ride actually was. So these are really close numbers, which means he rode a pretty consistent power output for the entire ride, even with this huge climb. And I read a little bit about his race, and he said he capped on the upper limit of his zone around 400 watts for this climb, which sounds ridiculous and super high, but he capped it there, and he didn't let himself go any higher than that, because again, had he gone up to even 410, that could be another match that he burns a little bit too early. So how we can kind of monitor our effort, there's a few ways. We can do power, we can do heart rate, and we can do RPE. So depending on what kind of computer you have on your bike, and you can monitor your heart rate and your power, and you're able to calculate those numbers. Those are great. For all of the racing I've ever done, I've never worn a watch. I've always done the short stuff. And so I've never used power or I've used power, I guess, but I haven't used heart rate in racing. But I think getting to know your perceived rate of perceived exertion is very important. So being able to know in yourself how hard you're pushing, and then being able to be honest with yourself and being like, okay, I'm racing a half Ironman pace. I should be around a 4 to a 6, but I feel right now I'm at a 9. I need to dial it back. So I think the RPE is going to be a really great way in yourself to know what kind of pacing you're doing. Because the thing with power and heart rate is that can change on the day. So if it's a really hot day, it'll be reflected in your power and your heart rate. If it's windy, if you're feeling a little off, it's all going to be reflected. But you can always ask yourself what your RPE is and be able to either dial it up or dial it back. This is an example of how to calculate your heart rate zones. So I found this on Polar. I won't go through it because we're a little bit out of time, but heart rate again is another way to monitor your effort through the triathlon. I think it's also really important for triathletes to have some really great technical skills, even when you're racing the long distance, because even when you're out on a TT bike, maybe you have some deeper wheels, the wind can really throw you around. So being able to have a really great balance on the bike and body position over the bike will allow you to better handle a TT bike. As well as there's still corners in the longer races, and being able to ride technically well on a TT bike is an important skill and a way to get some free speed out of the race course. And it's especially important again in that, like, for example, that Rotterdam race I showed you, you definitely wanted to have some good skills on a course like that with a mixture of cobblestones and cobblestones with moss. So I think everyone can benefit from doing some good technical work. And in this picture, this woman is doing a water bottle pickup drill, which helps teach you how to balance yourself over a bike, and then also teaches you how to lean it when you are going through a corner. One thing I'd probably ask her to do is keep one leg down, one leg up, because that's how you go through a corner. All right, so on to some run strategies. So we definitely want to add in some bricks to your training so you can practice running off the bike. Most important thing is going to be focusing on that stride rate, and then to stay in your own zone and run your own race. So running off the bike is a feeling like none other. Like, it is really hard to get that sensation from pure running. So one thing you definitely are going to want to include in your training are some brick runs. So there's a few different types of brick runs you can do. So in this sample schedule, I found there's a brick run on Thursday. And so for this brick run, what makes it a brick is it would be followed right after this bike. So that means you would finish this ride and immediately put on your run shoes and go for like a short run to get a sense of what it feels like to run with those heavy legs, which is why they call it a brick run. Another type of brick run you can do, which is great for the shorter races, would be doing some short intervals of bike and run. So for example, you could do like a 10-minute ride and a 5-minute run off the bike, and do that maybe 3 times. And that's really great practice because it also means you can do some transitions, and you run through that multiple times. Focusing on the strike rate is also, I'd say, the number one thing you can control when it comes to run form. So I know in the past I have gotten too caught up in thinking about my run form and trying to control my stride. And I've always run my best when I've just kind of let go and let my body run as it naturally wants to, but then focusing on having a higher strike rate. So this is a picture from a half marathon I did. And so the average strike rate was 183, the maximum being 191. And you can see here, it's like pretty consistent throughout the whole way. And so what's recommended for a strike rate is going to be 180, above 180 for if you count both legs. So that's the number of steps you take per minute. So one way you can take strike rate when you're out training or you're racing would be to time 10 seconds on your watch, and then you count the number of steps for each leg, and then multiply that by 6. So what you're aiming for is 30 steps in that 10 seconds, because when you multiply 30 by 6, you get 180. So that might be something you can go out and test in training, and then also kind of keeps tabs on yourself during a race. And that's something that you can continually check in on throughout the race as a measure, as again, one of those process goals that you can focus on. So to finish up, we just have some chatting about run pacing. So it's similar to the ride where, again, you want to keep the pace very consistent, and even finishing with a little bit of a negative split is always nice. Being able to run that last kilometer feeling really good and come into the finish line strong. So based on what distance you're doing depends on, or the distance you're doing has a certain zone attached to it. So a rating of 7 to 8 for an Olympic and sprint, 4 to 6 for a half Ironman, and a 2 to 4 for this Ironman pace. So there's also a way to calculate a specific pace if you do want to work off of that. So this is a chart. I do have the link for it, but it didn't get onto the slide. But what you would do is you would take your 5K time, and then there's a calculation that is done to get your functional threshold pace, which is the pace you'd hold for an hour. And then it calculates your predicted time for a sprint, Olympic, half Ironman on the low to high range, and then an Ironman from the low to high range. So let's say you could run 20 minutes, just under 20 minutes for a 5K on the track if you went out tomorrow and timed yourself. That means your functional threshold, or your functional threshold is going to be 4:15 per kilometer pace, which means you can predict to run around a 20:40 for the sprint distance triathlon, and that is going to be 103% of that functional threshold pace. And then the Olympic is 98%. Half Ironman is going to be between 90 to 95, and the Ironman is going to be between 75 to 80% of that functional pace. But again, you can always go back to RPE. I always recommend to go back to RPE because that's going to be more relative to temperature changes, to wind, to terrain changes, and just allows you to really get to know your body and make those intuitive decisions. And that's the presentation. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. And I hope with these strategies, you can have success in your next race and take care of the details so you can get your most of yourself and enjoy the experience. If you want to connect with me outside of this presentation, I'm on Instagram and I'm on LinkedIn. And then this is the kids program that I help coach with Kelly, and it's kellyskidstriathlon.com.
Thanks very much. That was great.
Awesome.
Amazing. Yes, that was fantastic. There's so many good tips and tricks and so many strategies to get everyone prepared their best for race day. So thank you so much, Ellen, for the presentation.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks everyone for coming.